What's the Church of Scientology so afraid of?
This is SPTV.
Welcome, everyone. I feel like it's been a little while since I've done a proper interview. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I do so many videos every day. But I want to introduce to everyone someone you've been doing a channel for a while now, but this is the first time I've had an opportunity to speak with you on my channel. Gabrielle Toth from the Escaping the Cultiverse A. And, for anyone new to her channel, this is it, Escaping the Cultiverse A. Now, obviously, the A's on there because you're from Canada. Your Scientology
Yes, I am.
experience was largely in Canada. And so I encourage everyone watching to go check out her channel and subscribe over there. I'd like to do a series of chats with you about various things about your experience personally and aspects of Scientology in general. For today, let's plan on doing a chat for about an hour.
Yeah.
And, we did chat yesterday and the day before about how we want to approach the discussion. I said I was trying to stay away from doing like a sit down, let's start from the beginning sort of life story chat. And, but even though we've sort of had a pre-discussion about, how we could structure our conversation, let me just throw it to you and you start wherever you feel is most appropriate to start for your story.
Okay. That's tough. I mean, we're talking like what, 26 or more years of being in Scientology, right?
So let's start here. Were you brought into Scientology by your parents, or and if not, when did you join? How did that happen?
So it was around 1988, and my sister and brother-in-law were already dabbling, doing some basic courses. And they were introduced by a band member. My brother-in-law used to be he's a musician. And his buddy, Peter, introduced him to Scientology. Larry's background is dabbling in kind of culty things. He was an est prior to that. So he's kind of like one of those guys that was always searching for something. So anyways, I had like a relationship breakup, and that's kind of when he swooped in to, do the introduction to Scientology. And so I signed up I did a couple of Div 6 courses. That was around 1988. And then I ended up joining day staff. I actually quit my job at a bank and I joined staff. And about 6 months later, I was in Los Angeles training on the organization executive briefing course and the flag executive briefing course. That was the lineup. That was one of the old ones. And that was still in LA.
I think a lot of people wonder, how does someone like get into Scientology? What is it at the lower levels, or what is it about the lower levels that kind of gets people interested and keeps them coming back for more? Do you remember what that was for you at that time when you first got in?
Yeah, I was doing a 9 to 5 kind of thing, and I was probably 20-ish, 22, and it just wasn't enough for me. And then the breakup really sort of opened my eyes up to the fact that I really don't know anything about relationships or about life. And the Scientology was introduced to me in such a way that it was going to give me the tools to handle life better. And, I wanted that. So, yeah, it was more like a self-help kind of idea.
So in the beginning, would you say that, I'm going to use some words carelessly because it's not how a Scientologist would speak, recruiters, the people who are working on recruiting you, selling you, closing you to keep coming in, were they pitching it to you as like the antithesis of religion and belief and faith? Were they saying anything about the religious, spiritual aspect at all?
No, I didn't even know what Scientology was. I had never heard of it. It was more being pitched to me like there's tools to help you in life. And it was done very low key. There was not a lot of pressure. I mean, this is back in like the late 80s. So it wasn't like super hardcore, and it was, for me, it was a welcoming environment.
Okay.
It wasn't
Okay, good.
anything hardcore, hard pressure, like sales pressure. No hard sell.
Okay, so you get introduced, it's basically a self-help tools to handle life kind of thing. How are you
Yeah.
convinced to join staff?
I think that's it was introduced and presented as getting executive training. So there was no sort of spiritual Scientology, anything like that. It was purely get ahead in your career. Now, I never went to college. So, and I really wanted, I liked admin. And I was always wanting to be more of an executive in an office kind of thing. So it was, it totally appealed to me. Go down to Los Angeles, and who wouldn't want to go down to Los Angeles and become an executive? And that'll help you, you can come back and be on staff, and then you can also get a job. I mean, it was never like, you're going to make all this money in being on staff. It was like, you can be on staff and then go and get whatever job you wanted. The world was your oyster kind of thing once you
Was there
got trained.
even a component at that time of saving the planet, clearing the planet, getting everyone up the bridge, why that was important, from like a prison planet perspective? Was any of that coming
No,
into play back then?
no, nothing.
Interesting.
It wasn't like that.
Interesting.
It really wasn't until I was down in LA where I got a taste of it. Because, yeah, anyways, my first book was Have You Lived Before This Life? And that was the first Scientology book I read. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. That's what actually kept me going. It was really fascinating. It was
Oh,
just
is that
so out
right?
there. Yeah.
Were you like, what does this have to do with executive training?
Well, once you get to LA, that was like a real culture shock to me. It was the first time I'd ever left home, ever been on a plane. Um, and it was me and this other guy that went down, and like Scientology in Vancouver is like about this big, right? And you're driving into LA, and I see the big, huge sign at CC, and I was like totally overwhelmed. So that was like a huge reality adjustment for me. And then you basically become a Sea Org member when you're on training, right? More or less.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's true. When we chatted the last couple days about what we wanted to cover in our first chat,
Hmm.
uh, I, we spoke a bit about, like, if I look at my story, I can, my story starts from when I was very young. By the time I got out of Scientology, I was 34. But if I take like a a high level view of my story, for me, one of the most compelling or um, the parts of my story that I find most outrageous is the way Scientology pretty much went out of its way to destroy my family, to destroy my wife's family, after having both of us having grown up in it and worked for them for the majority of our life. And I asked, and when I mentioned that, you mentioned that that is a major component of your story as well, of a family being destroyed. How do you think is the best way for us to go from your entry into Scientology, your experience joining staff pretty quickly, going for that executive training, and going from there to the point where your family is now experiencing what I believe every Scientology family will inevitably experience, which is the destruction of the family unit because of Scientology's policies and practices? What's
Yeah.
the best way to get there?
Um, I actually thought about this a little more after we spoke, and um, it actually starts. The destruction actually starts slowly, and like, I'll give you an example. When my mom passed away from cancer back in 95, I think it was, um, you're already somewhat disconnected from your family, because I was already on staff, and my mom has a major illness that ended up taking her life. And I already had the attitude that she'll, there's other lives. It'll be fine. She's just moving on. I mean, I was devastated, of course, but I would remind myself of this. So it sort of, you're already starting to sort of pull away from the whole idea of the family unit. And of course, when you're so busy in Scientology, you don't have any time to see your family, hardly any. So it's a slow progression. But what really accelerated everything was basically when my husband and I decided to leave. And I did my best to get my sister out, but that didn't work because she ended up turning me in to the ethics section. Actually, it was the executive director. And then Chuck had another friend that also, I guess, wrote a KR on us. So at that point, there wasn't even like, I was an HCO in the end, right? Hey, hold on one sec. I worked in HCO, so I dealt with justice and ethics actions, and it never even dawned on me that this would happen to my family. I helped people disconnect from other people because that was my job. If they were PTS, or or if they had to go down to flag for training and they had somebody who was antagonistic to them, I would help them disconnect from family members. So, but when the role was reversed, it was, to me, it was like, are you kidding me? This is actually happening. My sister is disconnecting from me. And that sort of started a whole domino effect of, she stopped talking to my father. Her kids started talking to me, so she disconnected from them. And yeah, and I mean, there's so many ins and outs of it. Like, my dad not understanding, like, why did she do this? Why is she not talking to me? So I had to explain what was going on, and he was like devastated. The hardest part, what ripped us apart the most was when my dad, he was basically very ill and he was dying. And I actually still have the text. I'm texting my sister saying, look, your dad is taking his last breaths. Would you please come and see him? And I had hoped so much that she would actually just put Scientology aside and just come and see her father. It was just like devastating. Like, how could you not see your dying father? So
and he wasn't even, he had never been a Scientologist.
No, he was very antagonistic, throughout our entire time in Scientology, because he obviously knew what was going on. He even visited, he actually was in a golf tournament in Los Angeles while I was training, and he actually came into the HGB and found me. Very resourceful dad. But, like, he hated Scientology because he also saw what it was doing to us.
So even though he was antagonistic to Scientology the whole time that you were in it and your sister was in it, she never disconnected from him until after you had left Scientology.
Yeah, after we told her that, I said, I'm never going to walk into a Scientology org ever again. I'm done. And that was after hours and hours of telling her. I sent her the Debbie Cook letter, and she had so many disagreements. So that was what the crazy, I thought it was a slam dunk gonna get her out. No problem. And I was like so shocked. I had no idea that she was that deep in.
Wow. So you said you got into Scientology in 88. You were 20 or 22 at the time. What year are we talking about when you consider that you left Scientology, and how did that happen?
So I left in 2014. But in 2013, I got really sick. I was on post. It's a pretty rough and tumble post, right? And there was a lot of
Which post again? Which
pressure.
was it?
The has Hubbard
Okay, and
area sec.
for the listeners, when we say HCO, that's basically the HR division of a Scientology org, and the HAS is the head of the HR division. So, and in Scientology, that's recruitment, ethics, justice, discipline, and reception and routing of dispatches and stuff. So, okay, so you were the head of Division 1. You were the head of HCO.
Yeah, even though I wasn't qualified, but that's another story in itself. Because I was an EST and I had blown numerous times. But
you did EST? So that's Earnhardt seminar training. My only exposure to EST for a long time was growing up as a good little Scientologist. I was always told that EST was a squirrel. It was an offshoot. It was a destructive offshoot alteration of Scientology. There's a whole auditing program in Scientology designed to fix people who'd ever had anything to do with EST. And it's just considered like, it's considered just this horrible, horrible thing. And it's funny because I still have this carryover feeling like, ooh, that's gross. That's like, I still have something on it,
Yeah. It's a squirrel group.
In your experience, having done both, is it without a question an offshoot, an alteration of Scientology?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, even in the list of qualifications for HCO, if you were an EST, you are not qualified.
Wow. Well, that just shows how desperate. I guess that shows how desperate they were for people to work in HCO, right?
Yeah, and I know how, and the meter does not tell the truth.
No, it doesn't. Okay, so you were the HAS at Vancouver org. This is 2013, and you said you got ill. I think that's what you said.
I got really sick. Yeah, I got really sick. I got what's called Graves' disease, although I didn't know what it was at the time. But it's an autoimmune disease, kind of like it's hyperthyroid. So your thyroid gland is creating too many hormones, and I was like dropping weight like crazy. I thought I was on this fabulous weight loss diet. But in the meantime, I'm like shaking like a leaf because it speeds up your metabolism, and I was eating like crazy and still losing weight. And I was on my objectives because that was like the new round of objectives just before the survival rundown came out. So I'm really sick. I'm working like I had my own cleaning business. So I'm doing that during the day. And then I'm on post from 6 to around midnight, usually every day, except Saturday and Sunday is a little bit different. So I'm starting to like shake and starting to feel really bad. And then there was just one day I had to stay home, and then I had to stay home again and again. And so I go to a doctor, I get the diagnosis, and I'm like, calling in going, sorry, dudes, I can't come in. You're gonna have to, do it without me kind of thing. And I mean, that went on for a year, and I got put on a program and then sec checked in the end. Can you believe that? You're like interrogated because you are sick. Like, who does that? And I was actually interrogated. This was a bit of a surprise by the flag trained class 8 senior CS, who never does stuff like this, right? She would, I'm just like another staff member. So it was very unusual. I suspect it was because they didn't want to lose me. But at the same time, what was happening was my husband, he was sort of drifting off, and there was like rumors that he was, what was that, like disaffected with management, and he didn't want to come to events. So there's this other stuff happening in the background, and I'm actually being encouraged to leave my husband because he's not on board, and I should be there full time, yada yada yada. So I get sick. I'm at home. I'm not coming in. They're trying to do all these things to help me, and nothing is really changing. I slowly change my own diet, I start to get better, but not enough to go in. And I just slowly drift away. What really did it?
So
Yeah.
so when you say
Mhm.
drift away, at this point, you're not just talking about mentally, but like they actually let you continue not go into post?
Yes. Because I told them
Wow.
I couldn't do it. Like, I would cry the blues because like we donated tons of money to the Ideal org. My husband did another stint at Flag, where he was decleared and all that other crap. That was like 20 grand, and we're giving money to the Ideal org. It was like it's insane. It's like donation after donation. Even when you're a staff member, you're expected to do that. You're like given special privilege as a staff member when you're donating. You get to sit in the front seat. They did this whole status thing, right? They were even asking us to, like, when the humanitarians, the guys that gave like $100,000, when they would come into the org, they would, we were supposed to like greet them with humanitarian rock call. I was just like, this is closer
No.
to the end. I was just like, I'm gonna throw up. Like, seriously. But that's
Oh,
what it became, right? It's like that's who you're known for, is how much money you donate.
for those watching, humanitarian is the status they give you, like a plaque when you donate $100,000 to one of these new Scientology buildings. It's your status is humanitarian.
Yeah.
They actually wanted you to greet them as like Your Excellency, humanitarian
Yeah.
Hillary
Yes.
Rockel. Wow.
Yeah, so it was getting really stupid. So I'm at home, and then I tell you, this was a bit of a turning point for me. I'm a fan of Dancing with the Stars. And I just happened to watch Leah Remini when she was on Dancing with the Stars. And
Oh my God.
she was like letting her rip about the church, right? And I was like, oh my God, what a bitch. This is like one side of me going, I'm by myself at home. And then the other part of me is going, wow, that's kind of interesting. So, I mean, there was a seed planted there. Anyways, so I get this at the very end. What put me over the edge was my husband. We got into this huge argument, and I was still not on post, and I was trying to convince them that it would be best for me not to be on post, but just to go up the bridge. And I thought this argument with my husband was about an affair that he was having. And I was convinced he was having an affair because he was drifting away. And I said, like, what the F is going on? And he said, well, I'm done. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, like, I'm done. I'm never going back to Scientology again. And I'm like, I sat with it for a second, and then I went, yeah, so am I. It was like instant. It's like everything that had happened to us in the past, all the money donated, I had so much sec checking. It's just like disgusting. And the final straw was this ethics program that was written by Peter Byrne, the executive director, who I feel always had it in for me. And he wrote this ethics program that was like ridiculous. And it was meant to just kill me, basically. And I went, I'm not doing this. And that was it. I was done. And I was so relieved until we got declared.
Until you got declared. How long did that take from?
Matter of months.
Okay.
Because
did you think
I was
that you would not get declared?
The attempt was to be under the radar. Like, I didn't even know what this under the radar stuff was. Don't forget, I'm an HCO. I don't know this stuff, right? But my husband is like, on Marty's blog, and without me knowing, he did this for like 2 years. He was like on the internet, on Marty's blog, looking at stuff. Yeah. So he knew all this. And that's when he said, let's just sort of keep it under the radar. And, if I wouldn't have said anything to my sister, we still would have been connected, but she couldn't help herself.
Right. Okay, there was a question there that I had. Oh, during the time when you were still on post as the Has and your
Mhm.
husband's drifting away from Scientology, you're being
Mhm.
pressured to divorce him. Are you telling your husband that this is what your org seniors are floating?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Hey, there was some nasty little tricks done. First of all, the threat was if you don't go down to flag and get handled, I'm leaving you. That was something I was coached to do, and I did end up leaving the house, our place, for about 3 months or so
oh
because he
wow.
wasn't going down to flag. But you see, he wasn't quite out then. But then he goes down to flag, gets this non-clear R factor, and he's like, "That's fucking it." Right? It's like
So hold on,
20
hold on,
grand
hold on.
later.
So he goes down there to get handled for being disaffected, and they're like,
More or
"Oh, by
less.
the way, you're not clear. That'll be $20,000, please."
Yeah. Yeah.
They do it to themselves,
I
Gabrielle. They
know.
do
I
it to
know. I
themselves.
know. Yeah,
Oh
totally.
my
Like
God.
honestly, if I wasn't sec checked up the what, I probably would have still stayed. But that was really the deal breaker for me. Like, you're sec checking me, and I've been so sick. And I mean, you know what the interrogations are like, right? They're fucking brutal, right? Especially when they have a funny feeling that something is going on. It was like a tailor-made sec check from a class 8 that was trained at Flag that apparently was also sec checking int staff. So she
Mm,
was a nasty piece of work.
wow. What was her name
Yeah.
again?
Shelley Hawkett.
Shelley Hawkett.
Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, so God, it's just amazing. Some of these things
I
that they
know.
do, just the more time and distance you get from Scientology, the more absurd it seems. It's amazing that it ever seemed normal, right? Like,
Oh, I
you're
know.
trying to fix your disaffected husband by doing things that are only going to make it worse. His wife
Yeah.
threatening to divorce him, de-attesting him from clear and demanding he pay for the auditing needed to get back. Like, how can they think this is going to work either for the individuals or for the organization? Like, how can anyone think that?
Right. And he was like, he was a total opinion leader in the field.
Really?
He was one of the better FSMs in the field. And
Wow.
so, yeah, I mean, God, poor guy, he did OT5 like 3 times. He just couldn't get enough, right?
They just couldn't get rid of those body thetans.
No. No.
If there's like a succinct answer to this question, what is it like? Your husband had all the Scientology cred in the world. What is it that made him go, yeah, I'm not, this isn't it anymore?
I don't think it was just one thing, but I think the major factor was the Ideal Org project.
Mm,
Because I mean, he was on staff for many years back in the 70s, late 80s. And I mean, he was a Scientologist for 40 years. So he's like one of those old timers, right?
yeah.
And he just saw the evolution of, of Scientology just starting to turn into just a money grabbing, you know, scam, basically.
Does he remember what I'm describing as what someone before my generation, I'm assuming, would describe as the good old days when Scientology orgs were actually full and it was actually
Oh,
expanding?
yeah.
Like, does he remember those days?
Yes, he was part of those days.
Wow.
Yeah, he was. I mean, he was the DSEMSEC, and he had 12 staff in his division. He recruited them all. Like,
Wow.
that's like unheard of. Just one division, 12 staff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and everybody was going up the bridge too.
Wow. What we're talking about right here, in my opinion, is why the few Scientologists that are left, which sometimes I say it's 30,000 on it, it's probably closer to 15 or
Mm.
20 or something like that. They're going to be the hardest ones or the hardest ones to ever get to leave, because the ones who already have the knowledge of the experience of when Scientology was actually growing, those are the guys who've left because they've
Yeah.
seen what's happening. They've seen that it's dead. They've seen Scientology has changed so much. It's become this abusive, tyrannical fundraising organization. Whereas
Yeah.
even if you don't believe anything Ron Hubbard ever said, it used to be something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
But the people who know that have already left.
Yeah, pretty much.
The people who are comfortable seeing what Miscavige is doing and going, oh, I can't support this. Those guys are gone. And the people who were there, well, I don't know. I don't want to speak for those people, but anyhow. Okay, so your husband, it was essentially the Ideal Org scam that made him go. Does he still believe in Scientology at all?
No.
Right.
No.
Then
we went through a phase on that one. That's another story for another day.
Oh, that would be an interesting story for another day. Let's
The
definitely do
independent
that.
field. Yeah.
Yes, let's talk about that another time. By the way, is this something your husband would ever be interested in chatting about as well?
He's not as outgoing as I am, but we'll see. I've been trying to get him on my channel. I said, will you come on if I get 1,000 subs, honey? He said, I'll think about it.
Okay, so I'm curious. You were still a dedicated staff member during this Ideal Org program. While you were on staff and he was drifting away, was he trying to get you to see it come over to his side, that this Ideal Org thing, everything has completely gone off purpose, it's all a scam, or was he kind of leaving you alone?
He was kind of leaving me alone. Like we talked tons about this after, right? I think we stayed up for like almost 24 hours after we both decided to leave, and we just like talked a whole bunch of stuff. But it was now I forgot the question. What did you ask?
Oh, was he basically trying while you were on staff and he was off staff? Yeah.
No, he was not. He was afraid to. Like, I was scary. I was a scary HCO staff member, you know? It's like I played the role, right? Hey, I even summoned him in for an ethics interview on the meter. You know, it's like the shit you do to be a good staff member, right? Dedicated.
Wow.
So, yeah, I was
honestly
trying
amazing
my best.
The marriage even lasted. Sorry.
I tell you, yeah. You know, there's a woman, I'm sure you heard of her. Her name is Yanya Lalich. And she's written some books about cults and stuff like that. And I spoke to her a while back when I was doing some webinar courses on how to understand cults and crap like that. And she told me it is very rare for a cult, like a married couple that got married in a cult, to stay together after they leave. It's like, it's tough. I mean, honestly, we met in Scientology. We got basically set up, you know. Scientology was everything. That was our whole world. That was our reality, right? But fortunately, we're both Hungarian, so we're both pretty feisty and stubborn, and we get along really well for the most part. So, I mean, that's why we lasted, I think.
That's great.
Yeah.
I derailed the conversation at one point, and I'm having trouble remembering where we were at. It was you. I think you said it was a few months between the time that
we got declared.
Something happened with the ED and the time you actually got declared. I think I asked you whether you thought that you were not going to get declared, and I forget what you said in response to that.
I never even thought about it.
Oh, under the radar. You were talking about under the radar.
Under the radar.
Under the radar.
That's right. We were, yeah, exactly. So that's what he said to me. He says, let's sort of keep it under the radar. And I blew it on that because that's when I went to my sister. Like that was.
Yes.
So she narked, right?
Okay, let's talk about that.
I don't know. Like we talked on the phone for a good 2 hours, and I just like poured out my face off to her about the Debbie Cook letter and Miscavige beatings and everything that I could like absorb from the internet. I stayed up pretty late doing this stuff, and then I just imparted all that information to her, and she, she had agreements. I said, I was like, look at the org, it's not expanding, right?
Yeah.
Look at what's happening. It's like, Anita, how much, that's her name, she's passed away now. How much more money can we give? It's like they were cannibalizing the field. Nobody was giving money for services anymore. It was all going to either to IAS or Ideal Org. It's like, so what are these regis supposed to do? Like, who get beaten upside the head so badly because they're not, regging enough money for services. But it just fell on deaf ears, and she went and turned me in, and we were close. Like, we were
Wow.
really close, like, wow. That was the shock of a lifetime, I think. Such betrayal. Complete
Wow.
betrayal.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, I wanted to tell the viewers real quick that the Debbie Cook email, Debbie Cook is someone who at one time was one of the most respected executives in Scientology. She left the Sea Org, but was still in Scientology, was sort of being nice and playing by the rules for a few years. And then on January 1st, 2012, she sent an email out to basically every Scientologist in the world saying, David Miscavige has taken the Church of Scientology off of its purpose, and he's violated what L. Ron Hubbard said should be doing. And she basically said, stop supporting David Miscavige, go back to doing real Scientology. And this was a huge deal when it occurred.
Yeah.
And by the way, you mentioned, forwarding or talking to your sister about Debbie Cook's email. My mom did something similar, talking to other Scientologists about that email. And that's what got my mom declared a suppressive
Right.
person and kicked out of Scientology.
Yeah. I mean,
So
it could have been a
in some ways,
combination.
that's what got you kicked out, is talking to your sister about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I didn't stop for like 2 hours straight. It was just like everything under the sun, moon, and stars that I could think of all the nonsense that was going on. What was very shocking was the abortions and stuff like that. That was like, that one was tough, and beatings. I mean, there was a lot of arguing, yelling, and stuff like that in the org. But not I mean, so some of that sort of trickled down, and so that wasn't unusual. I mean, the beatings obviously were, but the yelling and that kind of stuff. I mean, that was commonplace, right? The verbal abuse, degrading the person, gaslighting, that happened on an hourly basis. But yeah, and she knew that, she agreed, she saw all of this, but it didn't matter because she was, she had done the PTSSP course 3 times. So I guess, it was the right thing to do. And the other part of it is, there's probably some competition there, maybe some sibling issues, I don't know. But to turn your sister in like that on a dime, like, I mean, she didn't even, like, hardly hesitated. It wasn't like a week passed or anything like that. This was days.
Wow.
Right?
Was she also a staff member?
Yep. She was the
What was her post?
PES,
Do you remember? Oh,
Public
okay.
Exec Sec.
So she was responsible for bringing new people into Scientology.
Yeah.
Was she your older sister?
Yeah, she was 7 years older than I was.
So at the end of that conversation, did you feel like you had made headway with her, or did you know she was going to turn you in?
No, the turning in part, I had no idea. I was just like, she didn't say a whole lot, and I wasn't like, it wasn't. I noticed that there was a difference. There's something was up, and the shitty part was there was another friend of my husband's who was actually responsible for getting him out, and I had mentioned his name, and it sort of got through the grapevine, and he ended up getting declared as well, and his family. He had a daughter at Flag and stuff like that, and they disconnected from him. So I mean, there was like quite a ripple effect just from my 2-hour conversation of trying to get my sister out. But yeah, so I get a phone call from the ED. He's like, "We know where you stand. It's over to justice." And I was like, "What?" Like, okay, like, COMEV, is there going to be like a committee of evidence? Like, can I see a knowledge report of what this was all about? Nothing. We didn't even get an actual paper declare. We found out from a friend that they had posted our declare on the notice board in the org.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
By the way, if you're watching this video live right now, do us a favor and hit that like button, please. It does seem to help with notifications. I can't help but tell you a quick anecdote just because I want people to understand how similar these experiences are, where I had a good friend who lived down here in Clearwater near me. We were good friends back from the Philadelphia org days. His name's Yves Martin, Canadian guy, Yves, Y-V-E-S. I believe he grew up in Quebec, if I'm not mistaken. Him and his wife, Brenda Martin, still live near me. Our kids were friends. We were friends. And, on my way out of Scientology, I spent a lot of time under the radar, like your husband did.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that happened at the tail end was me and Yves would have these big, long, heartfelt chats / debates about everything in Debbie Cook's email and the Tampa Bay Times and all this stuff. And I thought we were making headway, like, right. But it turns out he was just having these conversations and debates with me to basically elicit as much as he could from me to see just how far down the rabbit hole or how far gone I really was, just so he could then turn around and report all of that to Scientology. And we were almost the best of friends. I probably had a couple of friends who I was closer with, but we'd hang out literally every week. Every week we'd hang out at each other's houses for hours. Our kids were besties. And his whole mission was just to juice me for as much info as he could so that he could turn it over to Scientology.
That's so fucked up.
That's how it is. There's no such thing as a real friend in Scientology.
No, you find that out very quickly once that declare comes down. Like, there wasn't even an attempt to really recover me or handle me. It was always like, well, Chuck's the SP, you're just PTS kind of thing, right? And which is what I believe happened. Like, even after I had clients that were Scientologists, right? And Susan Kerr was one of my clients. You know who that is.
I think Susan's, so my brother-in-law, Adam Tozier, is married to Holly. Is Holly Kerr,
yep,
Susan Kerr's daughter?
Yeah, I think, Susan's last name used to be Burnham.
Oh.
Yeah, Doug Kerr. Doug Kerr isn't her father. I think it's Burnham is her.
Oh, because I never knew her before she was married to my brother-in-law. So her maiden name might be Holly Burnham?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So now Susan, the interesting part is she's DSA. She's like DSA PR.
I always forget that.
Yeah.
So my sister-in-law's mother works for the Office of Special Affairs in Vancouver.
Yep. Or
used to.
I don't know. I mean, this is 10 years ago now, I guess. And I mean, Susan is a peculiar woman. She's as sweet as pie, but like, to work in DSA, you have to be pretty slimy, So there's the two faces there, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're handling all the garbage. And it's kind of crazy in Scientology. You wind up with these people who are kind of good people who end up, I don't know, having this split personality where they're literally dealing. They know Scientology's dirtiest garbage, or at least we assume that they do. Maybe the DSA Vancouver only knows the garbage in Vancouver. Like there has to be there's probably still a lot of compartmentalization that happens. Yes. I see someone asking in the chat, what is DSA? So the DSA is the Director of Special Affairs. They are the head of the Office of Special Affairs. You'll hear us call it OSA because that's what they call it in Scientology. And that handles all the legal, the public relations, And they're the ones in charge of basically destroying Scientology's enemies as well.
Yeah. Oh
Like,
yeah.
I know that. So
Mhm.
when I was in Philadelphia, my mom was the senior CS. She was married to the DSA, Bruce Thompson. And I know for a fact from firsthand knowledge that Bruce would be assigned to go collect the garbage of people Scientology was investigating. Like,
Wow.
it's and in his day job, Bruce was a flight attendant. He was a flight attendant, but his job for Scientology was in part collecting the trash of the enemies that Scientology was investigating, like literally collecting their trash.
Yeah. Yeah, my husband did a little stint in DSA too. Like, well, they sort of recruit people too. Like, look, because he's OT or was OT, they ask them to do like special little projects and stuff, and so he got to follow some psychs and stuff like that here in Vancouver, and just really yucky stuff. And even with like the Anonymous too, right? When we had them out in front of the org, they would put out the OTs and DSA would organize all that, right?
Right. Okay. Let's wrap up today's chat with this,
Okay.
talking about this next topic. Let's explain this phenomena of you and your husband are already at a point where you don't want to be involved. You don't believe in it. You don't want to support the organization, but you're still very upset or objecting to the idea that they're going to officially expel you. Let's talk about what's going on there.
I mean, there's the written words of L. Ron Hubbard that say what to do, right? Because I was an HCO, so I kind of suspected, okay, so this is how it's going to go down. You're going to get some KRs, you're going to have the committee of evidence, and then you're going to get, you're going to get expelled. But this didn't go that way. This was like instant declare. So when we found out, it was like there's no such thing as an instant declare. So we were like shocked, and we were like, this is outrageous. We were actually protesting, going like, what is this? And this was one of the things that probably upset us the most. It's like, give us our due, like, let us speak. Because if we were able to talk, I mean, we probably would have spread a lot of N theta in a ComEv and argued our point, right? So it's probably one of the reasons why they don't give you a ComEv. They don't want to hear you. They don't want anybody to hear you, because the committee of evidence is supposed to be a bunch of members of the church. Right? So you would be sitting there spewing this, Miscavige is a scumbag and blah, blah, blah. They don't want to hear that. That's what they want to avoid. And it never freaking dawned on me. So that's how that sort of played out. And then, I think also what may have sort of pushed it over the edge is we connected up with some other people, ex-Scientologists, who were in the independent field. So that didn't help. And I told my sister that too. And then I also connected up with another, he was the former CS, senior CS. His name was Chris Black. And he got declared many moons ago, right around the time of the golden age, the first golden age of tech, and he refused to go down to flag. So he ended up in the field auditing, whatever he was auditing. It was like Scientology pre-1980 or something like that. Again, it was part of the independent field. I'll never forget what he told me, because I was there when he got declared. I actually had to escort him to Toronto. That's where the Continental Liaison Office is, the head office for Canada. Yeah. He got escorted by 2 staff members on a plane to go get declared. And I'll never forget what he told me when I connected with him. He said, this field outside of Scientology is like the wild, wild west. So just watch out. And it was nuts. Like there's so many things going on in the field, so many independents doing this kind of Scientology or that kind of offshoot or calling it whatever they call it. So it was, like when you get out, it's like your head's kind of spinning because you've had the rug pulled out from under you. Everything that you thought was true is not true. It's all a lie, pretty much. And now you're left with, oh, well, should I go into the independent fields? Should I still get Scientology? Because, Scientology, the tech is still okay, isn't it? And then there's this process that you go through to figure out, no, it's all bullshit.
I was going to say, doesn't it
yeah.
seem like the independent Scientology field is shrinking just as fast as regular Scientology?
I don't know. Honestly,
Yeah.
I don't know. It was just really strange to me that they were just kind of, it wasn't structured, and there was different groups, and it was just really weird. Like I didn't feel comfortable because I was so used to just Scientology.
Yeah, I never had anything to do with the independent field, but my mom did. Because my mom was one of those flag trained Golden Age of Tech Class 6 case supervisors. And the thing is, I never had, I barely wanted to do Scientology when I was in Scientology. I sure as shit wasn't going to now do it when I was out of Scientology.
Right.
But I would at least hear about it. I would hear of people. I would hear of things going on. My mom would have people she was auditing, outside of Scientology. And then I just stopped hearing anything about it. Like honestly, it might seem like, it just seems like there's nothing going on, and that's okay with me. I don't give a damn. I never understood why people would want to do Scientology after leaving Scientology, but that's just
me. Honestly, I hardly did any actual bridge. I did more bridge outside of Scientology than I did inside, and I hardly did any. Most of my stuff that I got was like a lot of sec checking. That was pretty much it, and lower bridge. Couple of purifs, lots of objectives, and lots of, I was going to mention something, but it'll open a whole can of worms. But the thing is, with the field, it's a lot of the old time Scientologists. They're dying. They're it's like they're dying. They're old. So it's probably one reason.
That's true. That's true. That is actually a really good point.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap up this chat for now, and let's do a bunch more in the future. Here's one super chat that I saw come in. Does the U.S. not have the GDPR, data protection? How does Scientology manage to keep hold of people's details forever? I'm sorry, when I saw GDPR, I thought that was a German thing. So hold on, GDPR. Oh, General Data Protection Regulation. General Data Protection Regulation is a European Union regulation on information privacy. Yeah, the U.S. doesn't have something like that I'm aware of. And if they do, Scientology has the religious protection. Like the government doesn't have the ability, doesn't have any transparency, visibility into Scientology to see if they're complying with such rules. But I'm pretty sure Scientology doesn't have to comply with such rules, if such rules even exist in the United States. I don't think that they do, but I'm not an expert. Do you have knowledge about this? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I do know we obviously don't have tax exemption here in Canada.
Oh, there you go. That's interesting as well. Jamie Dodger says, how lovely is Gabrielle? Keep up the great content, A-Aron. Well, guys, for anyone joining us newly, here is Gabrielle's channel, Escaping the Cultiverse, and you can find her over there. And I wish we could go longer for today, but I've got to be somewhere in an hour, and I have tons of things I have to get done before I can leave the house. So this has been a great first chat. I'm glad we did it.
Me too.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. Thank you, as always, to everyone who watches until the very end, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here. Bye.